Sir.
I'm not sure. I think Dr. Paz was advocating for more marijuana use on campus. First off, I'd like to express appreciation kasi nung nag-aaral ako, bawal pumasok pagka hindi mo nabasa yung libro eh. Eh dito, pwede ka pa magtanong kahit hindi mo pa nabasa yung libro. So my apologies there. But I'd like to start off with the observation of Dr. Caoili about tuberculosis. And tuberculosis is a good example of why a fora like this is very important. If you look at the history of tuberculosis, the incidence of tuberculosis started going down around the 1940s, 1930s. But if you look at when the medication for tuberculosis was discovered, it was in the 1960s. So what happened in the 1930s that gave a drop to the incidence? And it's exactly like this. It's because of housing, cultural changes and the like, not necessarily medicine. So I'd like to put that forward as a preface of how the arrogance of doctors like me, although I'm with the UP Population Institute, can have to be toned down so that there's more exchange of this. The question I really have is with contraceptives and herbal medicines. Because from the limited scan that I have made, essentially all of those that were claimed to be contraceptives were actually abortive action. So I was just curious if in this scan of yours you found herbal medicine that was actually contraceptive and not abortive action. And then finally, in closing, I appreciate the observations of archaeologists, historians, and biochemists coming in because I'm not sure if Dr. Paz has observed this, but archaeologically there's a claim that they find the tabon plant in many of the prehistoric diets. Originally, the hypothesis was because of the taste. Tabon is that brown herb, brown fruit you put in inilaw in the south, not in the Tagalog areas, where it's a brown fruit. Originally, it was thought to be for taste, but later, biochemists discovered that it was for antibiotic properties. The fruit was there not only because of the taste, but because it destroyed the bacteria. So maybe the hygiene hypothesis is not modern. Our prehistoric archaeologists have also pointed out. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
When the Europeans came to Southeast Asia in general, including the Philippines, they'll observe that, of course, one of the observations was that women had a very high status. But one of the reasons why they thought so was because women could decide to abort their babies. But the reason for aborting their babies was not just for, because out of a whim, because they would do that in times of famine or war or epidemics or pestilence. And so the decision to abort the baby was an act of courage because it was intended to save the baby from having a difficult life. And so the idea of contraceptive, I think, may not be easy to find. But abortifacients, yes. And I don't know if there was already the notion of but contraceptive is always, my association is that it is always associated with family planning. Maybe not. But yeah, I don't think so because there was not a lot of people. Number two, there was no really direct intention to control population. And if you need to control your population, you can always do that. I mean, women need not be told to just abort their babies. So I don't think so.
I think Dr. Paz is something.
I'll add. I think it's also cultural because if you take a look at early missionary accounts, they noticed that women didn't like to have many children. That's why there's the common knowledge that ang buntis, huwag mong pakakainin ng kambal na saging. No? May mga ganun na. And when one takes a harder look at it, it's because having many children was comparable to being like a pig. That was one. And second, it would affect the inheritance. If you have many children, the share of inheritance will be smaller. So they would really prefer having fewer children. Even early 16. Mga 16th century na, kaya yung kay Placentas Las Costumbres de los Tagalogs, napaka-detailed niya sa inheritance. Kasi, yun na nga, parang importante, kaya nga meron pang parang civil code na yan sa Placentia, kung ang mag-asawa ay isang freeman at isang slave, yung mga anak nila, kung apat, isa ang magmamana dun sa status ng ama, yung pangalawa, yung status ng nanay, tapos kung odd-numbered, kalahati siya. Ano mga ganon. So I think it was, but I also agree, medyo mahirap ano yung talagang kung merong contraceptive, pero may abortifacients, no? At hanggang ngayon, sa Quiapo, ang tawag nila dyan euphemistically, pamparegla. No, so kung kakausapin mo yung mga nagtitinda sa Quiapo, kaya Quiapo is really very interesting place. You have the sacred and the profane in one place, no? And yes, just outside the church. So they don't readily say it's an abortive fashion, but they will say, ano pong hanap nyo? Yung pamparegla? Yun. So ibig sabihin yun na yun.
No, it's good. Nagustuhan ko that you also say like kambalas na iwasan mo yung kambalasagi di ba and there's another saying that's connected with ginhawa, and I think may sugat ka sasabihin malayo sa bituka yan. I always wondered about that, but that's exactly connected. There's a locus for ginhawa, and that's what a lot of our colleagues are saying. You want to add to that before?
Yung yung nausok, pagdidilat, dapat dito sa may, sa solar plexus, para maginhawaan ka na naman. Dahil nga, yung nausok ka, may stronger force, usually mga babies may mahina daw ang kanilang So, sasabihin ng nanay, pwera usok. Diba? O kaya may mga bracelet o yung pinapahid sa baby dahil nga sa usok. Pero, yun ay dito sa tiyan pa, hindi naman didilaan. Nung hinahalaan mong nag-usok at magkakaroon ka ng ginhawa o yung baby ay magiginhawaan ulit.
And which brings us, segue natin ulit sa kaninang discussion lumalabas naman about well-being and ginhawa that and Mercer already pointed out, it's a more comprehensive, it's a world that medicine or plant from plants is just a part of it. And it would be a good question really, how central is it in well-being or ginhawa? And that would be interesting. And I think linguistics has a role here. Sayang, wala na yung tiga-masco na tanong about madness, di ba? Or mental health. But I think a way to study that is to look at our language and then see the earliest definitions of yung baliw, di ba? Or lahat yung, and then see yung actual niya, because that would be a good start to get into a definition of what is considered by society, and let's say the 6th century, where we have all the dictionaries still, of what is the dichotomy between wellness of mind and unwellness of mind in a society. And then, see if any of the plants would be something that you can use to address that. But I think the definition of unwellness of mind for us or mental health is not connected to all of this. It's a different kind of worldview in my view. And then, to react to Dom's statement of the models of this transition from gathering hunting to agriculture, in the early 20th century, it was seen as a positive, overall positive for the health and well-being of populations until all the data came in. And then, of course, the more distinct one would be the transition from agriculture, rural to city, urban. I think that is a valid one. Now we question whether it's valid to say that the gatherers and hunters were, well, it was a reverse. The first, by the 70s, they were saying, oh no, the optimum, good health were the hunters and gatherers. As soon as they became agriculturists, they then started to have bad health, bad teeth, everything, and they died like flies. We have a small sample, but we published it early last year in a compendium of practices of bioarchaeology in Southeast Asia, looking at human remains. The problem with human remains, the good thing about it, some diseases are manifested in the bones, and we dig bones, right? And we dig cemeteries. And so we have a site where we have a population that we can consider gatherers and hunters, and a population that we can consider as people who are culturalists, because it's the 19th century, 17th century perhaps. And when we found out that they both have, they manifest diseases that the gatherers hunters, right, manifest diseases that are very similar to the diseases that we find in the later periods, right, the later bones. And then we question now the entire thinking, that we reverse it again. That in other words, the sample is small, we cannot be precise, we can only infer, is it the tuberculosis, is it cancer, is it, what are the manifestations? It is not an exact inference, but, and the sample is small, but it can, we provide an insight. And that actually is a partial answer to your question. But like I said, for historians, 300 years is long. For archaeologists, it's very short.
There was a question from that side.
Congratulations on the Planta for your book. What I'm most interested in, it was already mentioned by panelists, the importance of linguistics as maybe the repository of things that we could maybe eventually find out discover from this work. But I am most interested in, earlier today it was mentioned that this is some kind of thesis defense. So I am actually most interested in the methodology. So how did you manage to gather all these materials that you use? Although you already mentioned that this book is an easy read, even people without any background in maybe in medicine, medical field, can actually understand the work. So I haven't read the book, but I'm most interested in writing one. I'm being a professor of Spanish and Latin, and that's what brought us here. My students are actually here because although you mentioned about not being precise about the scientific names, but I do believe scientific names based on Western tradition, system of nomenclatura, they're actually coined in Latin. I am most interested in how those material, because I do believe the 16th and the 19th century, they are composed on the pages. That is what we say, composed on the pages, meaning they are all written in documents, and they must be written in Spanish and in Latin. So we are most interested in how did you gather all those documents, and which became the basis of your book, which at the end of the day is still part of historiography, and I believe historiography must have some scientific legitimacy, otherwise, although we believe now, modernist approach in the study of history, we do believe now we can do things like that. But I'm also interested in, because I also had that problem when I was doing editing of the medicines brought on the galleons. We are actually coming out with a book on the galleons, 5 volume, also working with people from the Department of History, and I had difficulty understanding the different medicines that were actually being described because I couldn't understand. Although what we did, we just decided to simply copy them verbatim. But in reality, it was a great challenge for all of us. One of the volumes is entitled Health on High Seas, which is very, very interesting. And when I was actually translating and reviewing the translation, I really found it difficult. And I guess your book is also going to be a great help for us to be able to decipher what is behind those codes. Thank you very much.
Who's publishing it? 5 volumes?
Yes, sir.
Who's publishing?
National Historical Commission.
Actually, when I first started to work on this project, I was worried that I will not be able to do it. Because for history, you really have to have the sources. And the sources, fortunately, are not just available. They have been translated. So for instance, you have the work most important in the work of Manuel Blanco. His work was done in 1893 in different editions. And it's still available. But in 1996, San Jose Museum published the entire 3 volumes of beautiful plates. It's the same, it has been translated. The challenge was to be able to identify the plants that Blanco had identified. When you see that 3-volume work, it's very big. It was one of the most important contributions of the Augustinians in the Madrid exposition in the 19th century, art. But when you look at it, you cannot identify some of the medicinal plants. But fortunately, in 1920, I think, there is this huge repository of, it's called it's the joint project of Royal Botanical Gardens Kew in Missouri. It's called a plant list. Okay? The plant list is the huge compendium of all medicinal plants that have ever come into scientific knowledge. And so, when you look at the work of Blanco's work, on first glance you won't know what it is, but I consulted a botanist when Leonard Coe was still alive. I had a chance to talk to him. Then people from the Institute of Biology. And there was a botanist who helped me fix it. And so, but you can trace it through the plant list. And another important source was the work of Alcina's work. His is the first ethnographic work that looked at the different medicinal plants in the Philippines. And his is the first major work that for the 16th century, and it is now available. It's translated into English. First available in Spain, then in the Philippines, in several different versions. You have one in Filipiniana Sacra. And now the UST has come up with a volume. It's 5 volumes. I think 1 or 2 is missing because according to sources, that manuscript was like burned. It burned. There are many versions, but in terms of the sources, it is not as tough. For as long as you know which ones to take. Guerrero's work was available in the 1918 census, published under American period. And you have a compendium of Eduardo Quisuming, 1956. So it was just, the challenge was actually to look at how they have evolved, they changed, to identify. A lot of plants I have left unidentified because I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know how to identify them myself. But the challenge was really to weave them into the bigger project of Philippine history. So how do you make sense? Because you have the data, you don't know how to fit it. It doesn't make sense. It's really not nice. So that was the more difficult challenge.
Well, we're down to just 5 minutes. So I'll give the next, possibly last couple of questions to UP Press Director Neil Garcia.
Hello everyone, thanks for this wonderful forum. I feel so bad for Burrs having to sit there and field these questions, right? But I have two questions. Actually, one's a comment, so I'm going to read the comment first and then ask the question later. I believe that the book's central thesis is the following, so I'm going to quote verse from your book. My concern here is not to make a critical assessment of the efficacy of these medical systems or to privilege one over the other, but rather to provide a nuanced portrayal of Filipino culture through an examination of the historical development of medicine in the Philippines, how traditional medicine was conceived, practiced, and studied, and how Filipino traditional and Western medicine have been made complementary as they exist alongside each other and are both being patronized by Filipinos. The book is an attempt, therefore, at piecing together an aspect of our cultural history. So it's not social history. And I think if it were social history, all those other demands that Dr. Camagay pointed out should be there. Cultural history, and I think it suffices. Through a survey of the historical accounts about traditional medicinal plants in the country, something very specific. So maybe the title is misleading because it's very broad. But if you start reading the book, you know it's just going to focus on the botanicals. This is an objective that the book successfully accomplishes to a certain extent, but perhaps a simple recapitulation or summing up should have been included in the concluding chapter. So I think that's probably what's missing in the book, Nurse. That going by the survey of Spanish and American archival accounts, Filipino society has long evinced a kind of cultural simultaneity in which perceptual modes, technologies, philosophies, worldviews, practices, and knowledges, which, as we know, are always ethno-knowledges, coexist. The fact that traditional medicinal beliefs and practices have managed to coexist with Western biomedicine in the lives of Filipinos provides further evidence of this simultaneity and syncretism. This book, therefore, doesn't just succeed in providing the Filipino reader a history of his or her usable past, but going especially by its compendium of medicinal plants, many of which are still very much around and in active use. Planta's book actually proves that our past is, in many ways, continuing and unfinished. So thank you for that wonderful service, Nurse. And your name, of course, is very appropriate. Planta for the plants. But my second point is actually a question, and I don't think it's just Nurse who should answer it. Maybe we all can try to weigh in. In Dr. Guerrero's foreword, she talks about the Quiapo Pharmacy, interestingly situated just across the country's leading mainstream drugstore chain. Very big sign, Mercury Drug. And situates traditional herbal medicines alongside agimat, anting-anting, and supplications to the Black Nazarene. I think that's the hierarchy of it. Pag hindi ko malapit to, hanggang sa huling-huli, go to the Black Nazarene na. The implication here is that they are all possibly salubrious or medicinal in the broadest sense of these words. Just how possible is it to write a history of traditional healing practices in the Philippines without prejudging certain of its aspects as superstitious, non-scientific, or plainly false? If the subject of this book were to be reframed and expanded, wouldn't it be possible to discuss healing within the broader framework of subjective and personal wellness? And as such, shouldn't it include all non-biomedical practices, like faith healing, right? Which is also traditional, okay? What broad philosophical perspective can make such a promiscuous or even irresponsible eclecticism possible? I believe one of the additional or future challenges for the writer of this book is the proposing or the crafting of such a perspective, which maybe it's too tough or difficult for any one person to handle. But that sort of clarifying of how these are ethno-knowledges, and so we should have a broad, embracing perspective that will not prejudge certain aspects as certain practices as false, and only certain others are valid. So thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to listen to this discussion. And first, thank you for your book, and congratulations.
Okay, since we're running out of time, could we have some short answers to the long question?
I just would like to mention that, sometimes we forget that for the longest period of time we were under Spain, actually the archives will be Mexico, because the ties we had was really with Mexico until the Mexicans had the revolution, which was 1820, so 19th century na. Now we had direct links. So, and we have not explored the archives of Mexico. So, usually, I think of 16th, 17th, or even 18th as the dark age of Philippine history because we have very little information about it. So, that's a big challenge. But little by little, we're exploring the Mexican archives through the galleons, no? Because I think the data on the galleons are a bit a lot. No? But I think we should really take a look at the Mexican archives.
Other responses? Yes.
Short answer to Neil's challenge, really. Then we have to have more social and historical research that spans this period. And as I mentioned, there's lots of many hidden documents that will definitely come out in the near future. And that's the reason why I was waiving this as a manifestation of that, or a evidence that there are so many hidden documents that are just coming out and still needs transcribed. Maybe I will get help also about that. But my short answer to Blanco was a rogue botanist. He didn't follow his other colleagues. And so he was creating binomial Latin nomenclatures on his own. No? And that would be interesting to study how he was choosing the words in Latin.
I'll give the last word to Dr. Caoili.
I would probably just like to add that although they're talking about like traditional herbal medicine or traditional medicine, I would like to see some kind of continuum emerge. Like we're not sort of dichotomizing like Western is this and traditional is that. It's just one continuum where we can all learn from different experiences. So although this might seem a bit tangential, I mean it is mentioned at least twice, like on page 105 and 107, that during the early years of the American colonial period, there was actually a serum laboratory. There were facilities for producing anti-sera and antibodies. And, you know, that's been lost. At some point, the government, I mean, this is post-colonial, the post-colonial government defunded this. And I think it's such a tragic loss. So, you know, I mean, if North Korea can, under pain of international sanctions, produce ICBMs and hydrogen bombs, why can't the Republic of the Philippines make its own vaccines and anti-sera like it did a century ago?